Adie's going to bring to life a little bit of stuff around kind of the evolving roles of outfielders and goalkeepers. I'm going to delve into a little bit of data around performing actions across the whole pitch and players that are now able to do this. And then Kearns is going to use all of his experience just to delve a little bit deeper into kind of developing football intelligence. So Adie, over to you first. Evolving roles of outfielders and goalkeepers. What do you think around that?
I think if you look at the current game, a lot of players are now not necessarily positioned and just labelled they're not labelled just in a certain position. They've got the skill sets and the attributes to play multiple positions. And yes, they might start. We'll take a fullback as an example. And we'll see this coming up shortly on one of the videos where actually, yes, they might play fullback, but they probably also need to have an understanding of what maybe a defensive midfielder does, potentially a more attacking midfielder and potentially a winger as well. So I think players having a more rounded education and understanding of different positions and the ability to shift and move between those positions is going to be really crucial.
Especially for maybe a lot of people on the call who don't have a goalkeeper coach or access to like a wider MDT, that ability to actually involve your goalkeepers within the practice is really, really important. Kearns, when you were playing, is that something that happened, that goalkeepers were involved within kind of possessions, rondos? What did it look like?
No, certainly not. They went over to Compost Corner and did their stuff. Yeah, it was very, the changing of rules, obviously the rule now where you can build from in the penalty box has certainly changed that. There were teams that tried to play through a goalkeeper, but generally during my time, the goalkeeper's job was to just save the ball, really, not start and initiate attacks.
Yeah, and that's a great point, isn't it? That rule change back in 2019 seems a few years ago now, but that obviously doesn't just affect how we might build up, it will affect how the opposition press and how they set up to start that press. And
we need players now who are able to play. We see goalkeepers that are very comfortable with being high up the pitch, at times stepping in almost like a centre-back in the back line. So again, the understanding of having to play different roles. There was a really excellent point on there from Daniel. He spoke about pigeonholing young players too soon in the goalkeeper position. And again, something we will allude to as we go on, the benefits of rotating players through positions at a younger age group so they can develop these other skill sets. However, just to caveat the in-possession piece, we can't forget still doing the out-of-possession work. And again, I think with young keepers, the psychological stuff around dealing with mistakes and actually how we manage that and support them with that to aid their careers when they get older.
Players that are able to perform actions across the whole pitch. So that links in really nicely around that, not pigeonholing players. So something that we've definitely been noticing with John Stones, obviously at Man City over the last 2-3 seasons, is his ability and his development to be able to play centre-back, at full-back. And now we started seeing him in kind of like a double pivot with Rodri, but we've also seen him playing higher up the pitch in like an 8 or 10 role. And Aston, who's sitting in the background for us tonight, he's put together this brilliant graphic on the left, which is just a heat map from a game Man City played against Man United. And you can see kind of the area of the pitch he is covering. So he's not your traditional old school centre-back where your role really was just to win the ball, be strong in the air, and probably get the ball to the better players who are able to do something with it. Now we're developing players through the pathway who are technically have that ability to do the defensive out of possession work, but also get on the ball in, tighter areas, back to goal, facing up, on the touch line, developing players like that are really able to kind of have that 360 to get on the ball and make different passes or stay on the ball for longer. Adie, I'll bring you in now. Obviously, it's similar to Kearns with Bellingham. You saw a lot of Maya growing up in her development. So, what opportunities was she given going through the pathway that has allowed her now, when we're thinking future game, to be able to be confident to step into midfield areas in and out of possession?
Yeah, so probably quite a different pathway for Maya because she was born in the Channel Islands. So my coaching experience with her was under 9s, 10s. With what was Hampshire Centre of Excellence at the time. So she'd literally fly in, land next to a training ground, come across the road, train and go home. I think the things that stuck out as a young player was probably opposite to what Kearns was saying about Jude, is that she was physically mature as as a youngster. She was probably a bit taller, a bit stronger, a bit quicker than some of her peer group at the time. What she was very technically good on the ball. She was, I think, from a sort of psych point of view, seemed very calm, very composed, and quite grown up in a lot of ways. What we tended to do in sessions at that age is, and I've seen this alluded to on several other conversations on the chat, is that we didn't pin them just in certain positions. What we didn't have was the benefit of her being able to play in weekly fixtures with us, mainly due to travel. But again, when she did, it wasn't a case of you just play here, you play here all the time. There was opportunity given to her and the rest of the team to rotate through and play in different positions. But it wasn't just rotating, you're here one week, you're there the next week. It was giving them maybe a block of time to develop and grow and understand what the position looked like and some of the roles and responsibilities within that.
And again, if we're giving players opportunities, Kearns, that will hopefully help them develop some football intelligence, won't it?
Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt. And there's a great clip here that you've put together of young players showing initiative and just sort of seeing the scanning and the technique of it, the timing of movement. There's a bit of disguise. That's not just a fluke. I know there's a little bit of a miss-hit pass at the end, but that early movement, and then the connections between the three players, it's fabulous. And I think the key to game intelligence is promoting decision making for the players. So what that does for the coach, does it give them change their role? So what is our role as a coach? Coaching is seen as so we're in charge and we instruct and tell, whereas young players need to experience lots of different things, but also have to work it out themselves. And the coach has to be very skilled in providing the right session, which gives them an opportunity to experience different. But then also the deliberate coaching. So, what is the role of the coach now? So is he more of an obsessive observer? Is he also a really astute session planner? And he provides sessions that challenge the players, and that can be the numbers, the size of the pitch that you can play with. So the 3 R's are something that some of the people online might have heard of, but it's around how real is it for the players? So is it stuff they practice in a game? What's the repetition? So what's the practice giving them lots of goes at? Is it with the back to goal? Is it with them running into spaces, depending on what you've done? And then the relevance of it. Do the players know where it fits and they can see? So just some things to really consider there.
Some key attributes you look at, for your players to have in different outfield positions. So, what do you want your fullbacks to be strong at doing? What do you want your centre backs to be strong at doing? What do you want your centre mids to be strong at doing? And is there something that we want them to slightly get better at? And so to do that, we might shift them to a different position. If we want them to be better at 1v1s, as a centre midfielder, we might give them more opportunities out wide where they might have more repetition to try those 1v1s and staying on the ball and moving with the ball and taking players on. If we want our players to become better receivers, we might put them more central within the pitch where they might have to have a bit more 360, where it's a bit more congested. So just start thinking about some of those key attributes. And Alessia Russo is probably one of the best around movement between the lines. She's great at dropping in as a number 9. But she looks very, very different to, we're going to go into a bit of detail in a second around Aggie Beaver-Jones. So Aggie Beaver-Jones for Chelsea plays off the shoulder. She's really pacey. She's good at getting in behind. But those aren't really the capabilities of Alessia. She's much better at coming and dropping into kind of like 10 roles and maybe that false 9. There was a great question earlier in the chat around, is the role of the striker going to disappear? Will we be playing with strikers anymore? And I think Russo's really good at being able to show that adaptability to drop into more midfield areas to get on the ball. Obviously, we see Harry Kane do it for England as well. And he looks very different against Ollie Watkins, who will play off the shoulder, run into channels. So obviously, same position, but their super strengths and their attributes within that look really different. And we can do the same for any position. So again, look, comparing two centre-backs here, you might have a little idea on the left who that looks like and on the right who that looks like. But it's really, really interesting here. We then again dive into it. You've got a John Stones at Man City who's able to get on the ball, obviously, in those central positions, back to goal, on the touchline, higher up in an 8-10, in and around the penalty area. You've got then a Mark Gahey at Crystal Palace, who doesn't have as many opportunities on the ball and in possession, but out of possession, he's really important, and he's really vital to how Palace play at the back with him and Anderson. And see, we saw later on in the season, they were a great force at the back. And as I said, we're starting to see that now between the partnership between these two, you know, that having the kind of bit of diversity between them in terms of Stones is a great ball player, which Gahey obviously is. He doesn't have as many opportunities within club football, but Gahey's really brilliant on those kind of defensive actions and those kind of really key blocks, those recovering the ball, aerial duels. So, you know, the value of having players that actually have like a really nice relationship between each other is also really, really important.
If we look at the 6 capabilities, you know, they're ticking all the boxes. But also, if you look from a social point of view, you can see that learners, you know, the calm about the job, they sort of, they go about, and you hear around if they've got this desire for it to prove themselves and be part of the team, and that's the sign of top players. They become one-on-one dominant as well. So they relish them battles. So a Carl Palmer, you know, he comes on in the Euros and for just 20 minutes and provides, you know, such excitement stuff. He just fearless. Do you know what I mean? There's no worry about it. He loses the ball, but then he'll run back to get it. Unbelievable. Effective actions, consistent. So there's a consistency with all them. And these words don't sound too sort of exciting, but consistently going about, you know, Mayhew, when he plays for England, he rarely gives the ball away. Mm-hmm. He's always available. He's got a calmness about him. You know, he just steps in there. Jude Bellingham is the ultimate adaptable player, and he steps up. The top players step up when they need to be. Mm-hmm. They produce that creative solution in unforeseen circumstances, i.e. an overhead kick in the 93rd minute for England.
But you can hopefully see there a really wide range of positions across the three. Then 2022, 2023, she was out on loan at Everton. So now we're in the WSL. So she's getting experience in the WSL. Club finished 6th. And then last season, she had a real breakthrough season at Chelsea, didn't she, AD?
She did, yeah. And I think what was interesting here is that I suppose the biggest question is, when is a player ready for senior football? And what are the key attributes or skill sets or experience sometimes that they need to go and get? Mm-hmm. So if we look at this, and we've seen some interviews with Aggie where she talks about the purpose of the different loan moves. So Bristol, for example, was an opportunity, one, to go and get senior football, but in the tier below in the Women's Championship, not the Super League. You can see on this heat map here, a lot of that time she was played off the left. But again, quite a lot of that, you can see there's a chunk of that played in more of these left-back positions. But again, lots of opportunity to push on, but gain playing experience. The next loan move was to Everton, and she speaks how Everton weren't a ball possession team, not at the time anyhow. So she had to learn a bit more about the defensive attributes, and Everton also playing in the Super League. So now she was stepping back up to gain experience in the same level as her parent club at Chelsea. So each of these moves were quite key and vital in helping her development. She then had the choice to go back to Everton. She chose to stay at Chelsea this year, and she got game time. And at one point, probably got more game time maybe than she expected due to the amount of injuries to key players across that front line. Again, if we look here, a lot of that play is coming in off a right. So what we've got here is a player who's quite versatile across the front line, understands the defensive roles. And she said actually in one of this interview that we saw, where she came off the bench quite a lot, but she said she had absolute clarity around her role and responsibilities when she stepped on the pitch. And because of that, that allowed her to then go and execute what it was that she was being asked to do.
We've got the data, but now we obviously want to bring it to life, don't we, with some video?
Agreed. Yeah. So for those of you that haven't seen this diagram before, this is what we call at VFA the 6 capabilities. So this is an observation tool. It's not there's different ones that you can use, but this is one we like to use. And I'll try and explain this quickly for you and something you can hopefully use in the next video. So if we take the player as Aggie Beaver-Jones, think of any aspect of a game. So you might look at it through an attacking lens in possession, 1v1, for example. So within those moments, we can consider her positioning, her movement, the techniques, timing, deception, and scanning. So some examples for you to look at and consider. When does she time her movement to break lines, to get in behind and to get on the ball? How does she deceive defenders when she's on the ball? At what point does she scan, and how does that link to her positioning? So think about where she moves on the pitch to be able to see what's coming and what might happen next. And then consider like her technique. So when the ball comes into her, what is her first touch maybe allowing her or setting her up to do?
Kearns, how do we actually learn as coaches which players might be best at adapting to this?
Well, I think you've got to give them the opportunity to sample it, and also, again, I know I'm going over stuff, but that environment where, you know, if someone plays in a position they've not played in before, there's going to be a consequence to that, because they won't be as knowledgeable and maybe not be able to take it on. So that's where they may need a bit more support from the coach. But giving them the opportunity and starting young is key, and sampling all them different positions. Also, so you need, we've got our 6 capabilities. You need to find some way of profiling the individual, and then fitting some of the your game style as well. How do you want to play the game? What do you promote? If you promote certain elements, do you notice that and praise that a lot? So it starts becoming, if you took the shirts off your players and they were fuzzy, and then you have 3 clips, could you know your team because you've got them free and you've got them playing in a way? There's certainly a coach. There's a coach element to it.
A lot of grassroots coaches don't have much contact time with their players. It might be 1 hour a week, 2 hours a week if we're lucky. So within that short amount of time, how can coaches really, I guess, be effective with the information they're giving their players around roles, responsibilities, positions, helping their players understand what's expected with them within those roles, linked to those attributes we spoke about earlier on?
I think it's really understanding what it is, one, that your players want to get, what's their collective aim, and then within that trying to give opportunities to individuals. If you have an hour training session a week, you have to prioritize. Something has to give at some point, because you can't give them everything in that time. I think key bits that you need to give them is the game. For me, if you have limited time, as much game realistic practice as possible, because that's what we're doing. Every player is coming to training to be better at the game. And if we don't give them the game, they can't get better at the game. So I think giving them lots of variance around that, if it's a short, narrow pitch because we want them to have to play through or play longer, if it's a wider pitch because we want them to exploit wider areas and get out there, if it's just a particular part of a pitch, say a right back area, because we're looking at how we defend those areas, try and make it as realistic as possible, and then give them at least a good chunk of that session back in the game and let them apply the practice back in there. Within that, there's going to be a couple of key players in every session. So if we were looking at a session playing through in midfield, if we have a midfield unit of 3, well, let's make sure at some point those players experience that position, and that we can really they might be the players that get a little bit more attention in that session. But over the course of maybe a 30, 40, let's face it, some of you are probably training every single week of this year. you have lots of contact time where each player can get a little bit of your individual attention. And even better if there's more than, yourself to have a training session. If there's 2 or 3 coaches, you can align different roles for each coaches to maybe work with some individuals or different units.
So, Kearns, I'm going to jump into you straight away with this. Around a player that you've supported within your own coaching environment, as a, being in a club. I won't name. Obviously, we're not going to name players, but do you mind just giving those on the call a little bit of detail around, what this individual looks like across the 4-corner model, and how what that support for them looked like?
And again, I was fortunate to be in a Category 1 academy at the time, and I had a lot of really good staff around me as well, and we constantly what we did, we engaged in individual player discussions, not related to getting them in the team to win, but relating to long-term player development. So at that time, this particular player was ripping it up, scoring lots of goals, and attracting a lot of attention from big clubs. But and we constantly found or gave him opportunities for his super strengths to come out. But then we did recognise that he needed maybe a little bit of work, because further down the line he's going to come up against top players, and if he hasn't got other skills in his toolbox, he's currently at a top club, he's been on loan in the Championship, and what we tried to through session design and game solving game problems, he could run in behind, he was very strong, held it up well, physical, turn players, strike the ball really well, scored lots of goals. But we recognised that the game, lots of teams would not at the higher level, and for him to progress, he needed to have a few other things around coming, playing as a 7 or 11, which he did as well, coming in off the line and trying to find them pockets when the space in behind wasn't available. And having the patience to do that, understanding that sometimes he needs to be part of a possession-based element of attack.
I guess if we jump onto your player, before you go in, communication key for you as well when supporting players?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think with all players, not just players, but parents especially, is let them understand what it is you're doing and why you're trying to do it, and that this is a long-term development program. This isn't an early specialization sport like maybe a gymnastics. We have the best part in most cases of a decade for these players to get to potentially a top end of a game. And if not a top end, the best thing in this country is you can play at any level of a game regardless of ability. So helping them achieve the best that they can. So you have time to do this, but just try and make the best use of the time you have.
I think the social corner is so crucial. And if you start with that, you'll reap rewards further down the line. So, you alluded to it about getting to know them as a person, and that sort of safe sort of environment where they feel as though they can flourish and be allowed to try stuff. And it doesn't mean they can misbehave, because that's an opportunity for them to give them a learning opportunity as well, because I know there's managing behavior as well as coaching football at times, but yeah, so that sort of connection before correction and stuff.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great point from me. That's my takeaway now. Connection before correction. I'll be using that with my own coaching. And AD, final point from you.
I think I put a quote in the. I don't think I know. I put a quote in the chat earlier on about what is tactically desirable needs to be technically achievable. So maybe to go away and think, about each of the individuals in your team and what is it they can do and what is it they can bring, and when are you going to stretch and challenge them by maybe putting them in a slightly different position or somewhere else. And if you haven't been doing that, give it a go.